You are deserving of happiness. You are deserving of healing. You are deserving of joy.
Whatever your dream is, whatever your passion is, work towards it. And put God first. God has to be in your life.
Wanted to use the skills and the training, hopefully to advocate on behalf of the community. I'm able to say that on Chop It Up. Be prepared to keep it real.
Hello and welcome to the Chop It Up podcast, the show that's unfiltered and unapologetic. Each episode will bring you closer to finding your purpose, so be sure to listen all the way through. Now, here's your host, Carmisha Superville.
Welcome back to the Chop It Up podcast. I am so excited, you guys. I am your host, as always, Carmisha Superville. You guys, I am so excited and so honored for today's conversation. Oh my gosh, we've been trying to coordinate this for a very long time. So, of course, I am so honored that she allowed time and space for us to speak on such an important conversation today. So, you guys, welcome back. As I said, today we have the honor of speaking with the lovely Andrea Bardot. She is an intuitive visionary guide, a channel of sacred knowledge, and energy healer. She's also an actress who played Ella on the hit, critically acclaimed Stars comedy Run the World. I am so excited, so honored to have this conversation with her. Andrea, welcome to Chop It Up. Are you ready to chop it up?
I'm so ready to chop it up. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited, so honored. You also got me out of bed early. I got my face beat for the day. We're going to talk about the divine feminine. It's going to be such a good day. And I'm really, really looking forward to this. And I'm glad that we could coordinate our schedules and make it happen. So thank you for your graciousness and for your flexibility.
Yes. Oh, you said it all. I'm so excited. So listen, I got a girl crush on you. Like literally.
Well, it is so mutual. Like my love and passion is just for women, like for women and specifically for the melanated Aboriginal woman. So that girl crush is so reciprocated.
Absolutely. I know because like I follow you on social and I just love um the how can I say you just live an open life. Like it seems that you are so in you intuitive. I guess that's the right word to say, right? It's intuitive. It's so refreshing. It's so refreshing. And I know this is not even part of the question, but it's so refreshing to see women of color like you that are living unapologetically, if that makes sense. Unapologetically and different to the status quo, to the statistic. I just love that. So please continue with that and continue with your gift. So yes. So
You.
I'm excited. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about feminine energy. Oh my gosh, please. How did you get into this work? How did you get into this work? And just as the listeners are listening, what is tapping into your divine feminine energy?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm probably going to talk for like 30 minutes now. So first things first, I'll just give a little bit of background because there's really no clear way for me to answer how I got into this work because it's something that I've always felt like I was drawn to when I was really young, when I was in my early to mid-teens. I remember feeling a lot of really deep painful emotions when I would look at the state of the world, but specifically the state of women around the world. There was always such a huge disconnect for me in terms of the way that women were perceived and treated within society. There was a lot of being a young girl, I just felt like this deep sense of unfairness and this deep sense of incongruence that I couldn't really reconcile. And I would look at systems like, like human trafficking and prostitution and domestic violence and even religion, and just things just didn't add up to me. Things just didn't make sense. And I remember, one of the first times that I really began questioning what I was told was when it came to religion. So I was raised in a Christian household. My mom is still very heavily Christian, and we had to go to church every Sunday. And when I was about, I think I was maybe like 11 or 12 years old, when you reach a certain age in the church, there's like the kids section where basically like I think it's like 10 and under go to like the kids church, and then there's like the adult cathedral, but then around between like 11 and 13, the preteen, early ages gets kind of split off into a different grouping. I forget what it was called. It was called, I think it was called the Potter's House. It was just like a little like subdivision of the church, basically for like the youth. And so on Sunday mornings when we would go to church, like the 10, 11, 12, 13 year olds would get split off. And then we would do more of like an in-depth, more like mature Bible study. And I remember having a lot of questions specifically around some of the stories like in the book of Genesis, like Adam and Eve, that just didn't make sense to me. Like, how is it that, this woman named Eve is the blame for the fall of mankind, and her choosing to simply take a bite of fruit means that now women for all of eternity have to suffer the pains of childbirth and menstruation and like all of the things that you're taught in Christianity. And I remember specifically one question that I asked where I asked the teacher if Adam and Eve were the only man and woman if they were the only man and woman in the world, and then they had two sons, Cain and Abel, how were they able to populate the earth without committing incest?
Mm.
And I remember her just sort of like being stumped and just being like, well, that's not what we're talking about here. Like we're not talking about that, and just like completely dismissed my question, which to me was a very logical, sensible question. Like, how did they populate the earth without committing incest? And her inability to answer my question, and other adults in my life being unable to answer what I felt were very simple, pointed, direct, logical questions, led to a sense of distrust with the authority or the narrative that I had been told from a very young age. And I continued to just question a lot of things. I questioned why women were treated the way that they were by men, why women were perceived as inferior to men, why women were, conditioned or even forced into systems of prostitution and human trafficking, and basically all of these oppressive systems that we kind of just accept as like a natural part of human nature. So from a very young age, I just had a lot of questions and a lot of distrust for the overall social narrative that I had been told. And I remember having this really deep sense as around like maybe 14 or 15 years old, when I was dreaming about moving to New York City and pursuing acting. I knew that I was going to be working with women. I knew that I was going to be teaching. I had no idea what that was going to look like. I had no concept of that, but I knew that I was going to be teaching. And I knew that my work as an actress was going to lead me into work as a teacher. So that's sort of like my backstory for just like the intuitive sense that I had at a very young age, but I had no idea what that was actually going to look like. It wasn't until probably, I want to say maybe 2000, like 2016, 2017, when I was in sort of like the beginning stages of like a really massive spiritual awakening that I was going through, where sort of my entire ideas around my life and what I was going to be doing started to shift. I started to, get really deep into spirituality. I had my first experience with psychedelics, and I divorced my ex-husband, and I just started really diving into the origins and um sort of the trajectory of like the historical trajectory of patriarchy.
Mm.
Because
Wow.
again, I did not accept the things that we were told about the state of the world when I thought about patriarchy, when I thought about this system, and when I juxtaposed that with all of the things that I see reflected in nature, there was an incongruence, there was an inconsistency. And so I started learning a lot about the origins of patriarchy, where this came from. I started learning a lot about biology, male nature, female and male biology, and just started kind of plugging a lot of the holes that I had in my perception, or in terms of what what we had been, what we are as a society are taught, specifically what women are taught as a society. So learning about socialization and where these concepts came from, and relating that to religion, and just the interconnectedness of these systems of oppression that we all have an instinctual, visceral, negative response toward, but don't really understand how it came to be. And so I kind of just poured myself into understanding, well, what's the root cause of all of this? Because what I've always understood as it relates to spirituality, as it relates to health, is that the root cause is where you find the answers. A lot of times in medicine, for example, we talk about the symptoms. The symptoms are treated, but it doesn't address the root cause, which is how you actually promote healing and restoration. So that's sort of like my long-winded, like not sort of Cliff's Notes, sort of long-winded explanation of just sort of like how I came into this work. And through my acting, through getting a platform, through having some success in the industry. You talked a bit about Run the World, and before that, I'd done NCIS Los Angeles and a couple of other like small roles on TV. My social media started to kind of grow a bit, and I just used that to talk about my thoughts. Like, this is what I see, and this is what I disagree with, and this is what we're told about the world. And I don't feel this way. I have a completely different perspective. And as I started sharing my perspectives, people would just be like, oh my God, I never thought of that before, or that makes so much sense, or tell me more, or I have questions. And it just sort of opened up this really beautiful opportunity for me to share my insights and my embodied wisdom. And women just started coming to me because what I feel is that they felt the same way as me, but they didn't have the words to articulate it, and I did. And so they started looking to me as a source of someone that they could come to or listen to get answers to the questions that their soul and their spirit had had for a really, really long time. And so now we are here, and I have just really in the last couple of years leaned heavily into, doing this work and using my gifts to help support women in shifting the narratives of what they were told, letting go of those people pleaser mentalities, or this idea that because they're born female that they're designed to serve men, or that they're designed to serve others, and that their thoughts and dreams and hopes and aspirations are secondary to what society has imposed upon them.
I love it. Absolutely. And even as you were talking, I was thinking about the work that you do. So it's a platform that you were provided with, but you've been doing this work all your life. And talk a little bit about your trauma, because I know I read somewhere that the work that you do also comes from a source. Talk a little bit about the trauma and how you've been able to recycle that trauma into promoting that type of energy, and talking about that female energy.
Yeah. So, the first thing that I want to touch on is what you said around, ooh, I lost her. So when you said that I've been doing this work all my life, that's something that I realized in the last couple of years, is that I have been doing this work all my life, and I didn't realize it because even as a teenager, friends would come to me and they would ask me advice for things, and even things that I had no experience with. Like, I remember being a teenager and friends would ask me for advice around like boys and sex, and I was not, engaging in any sexual activity as a teen. And that's like, I don't want to say it's normal, but it is common for teenagers to experiment and things like that. But my friends would come to me, and even though I had never done anything like that, I just had all of this knowledge, and I would talk to them about pleasure, or how to, set boundaries, or girl, you need to break up with him. He's a dog. And, they would just come to me and they really trusted what it was that I had to say. And I didn't realize that even from a young age, I was harnessing this gift. And as it relates to, to my story, a lot of times people look at me and they look at my life, they look at my physical appearance, and they assume that I've had just this really amazing charmed existence. And while I have experienced a tremendous amount of blessings, those blessings that I have come from having like this really deep connection to myself, despite the things that I've gone through. But I have gone through really, I've gone through really traumatic experiences. I've had a very traumatic childhood, just like a lot of other people have. And, so I grew up in a household where there was a lot of tension and there was, physical violence and physical abuse. And, my father was a drug addict and left the family, when I was really, really young. And my parents got divorced when I was a small child. And then we struggled with a lot of, there's a lot of financial struggles, and my mom was constantly under stress. And it just was a very, without giving too many personal details of some of the things that I've gone through, what I will say is that it was very hard growing up in the household that I grew up in with a single mother who was constantly under stress and didn't have an outlet for that stress. And sometimes that stress would get turned on to me and my siblings. And even outside of that, just watching the dynamic with my parents and the way that my mother and father treated each other, the way my father treated my mother, and then watching other women in my family and their dynamics with men, it just always felt like, what the fuck is going on? Like, this isn't right. Like, this isn't right. And what I didn't realize at the time was that the very things that I was observing, that I was rejecting, so many other people in similar situations, women specifically, look at that as normal. They look at being abused or mistreated or spoken down on or hit or degraded as just normal. This is the cost of being in a relationship with a man.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
right. And I just said, fuck that. I don't know if I can curse, excuse my language. If you have to beep that out, I'm sorry. But I just said, F that. Like, that's not what I want at all. Like, I would rather not be with anyone, which is one of the reasons why throughout high school, when my classmates were experimenting with boys and making and having sexual, contact, I was just like, no, I don't want to touch any of these dirty little beasts. Like, absolutely not. And I remember just setting a very clear standard for what I wanted in a partner. And I ended up meeting, my who would become my husband when I was 18 years old. And I never thought that I would get married at such a young age, but I got married when I was 23, but I met him when I was 18. But he was just, number one, he was just like the polar opposite of my dad. Like a lot of women go out and they end up attracting, carbon copies of their fathers as a way of like filling that wound. And I was just like, I don't want anything to do with a man
Yeah.
who treats his family this way. I want the exact opposite. So I went out and got the exact opposite, but it still ended up having our own issues within the relationship because of the trauma that I had endured as a child and the unprocessed, unhealed emotions that were living within my body still manifested themselves into my life in a multitude of ways, whether it was conflict within my marriage, conflict with friends, conflict in work and career. I was carrying a lot of anger within me from the way that I had grown up and feeling really unexpressed, feeling repressed in my expression because I don't know what your, upbringing was like, but I know that's something that's very common in, the Black or melanated communities is that children are to be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Our opinions don't really matter. Our feelings don't really matter. You do this because I said so, and if you talk back to me, you're going to get popped in the mouth.
Yeah.
Or you're going
Sure.
to get punished. And so what that causes, in a lot of us, especially as young girls, where we're being bombarded with all of these oppressive messages outside of the home and we're being oppressed within the home, it just creates this huge disconnect in the system. It creates this disconnect with yourself. And my anger, what I learned later, my anger came from feeling misunderstood, mistreated, and unexpressed in my feelings and my emotions. And so for me, whereas a lot of women internalize that and they go against themselves, they self-harm, they attract abusive partners or abusive relationships. On the flip side, women such as myself become a little bit more volatile and more explosive and are more prone to outbursts and things
Mhm.
like that. And so that was sort of like my story going into young adulthood and into my late 20s, was that I would have conflict where I would just like snap on people and I was just like aggressive and, just I'm going to say what I got to say and you're going to hear what I have to say. And so much of that came from not feeling expressed as a child. And so as my marriage began to deteriorate and I had the first beginnings of my spiritual awakening, and I started to recognize, okay, there's more to life than this. Like I want more than what it is that I have. I started to desire healing in a way that I had never desired healing before. And I didn't know that healing was what I wanted. I just knew that the way that I felt, I couldn't go on continuing to feel that way. I couldn't go on continuing to feel depressed and suicidal and like the world was out to get me, because that's how I felt for a very, very long time, like from my teens all the way through my 20s. That was a lot of the energy that I carried, despite also being charismatic and fun and light. And, I had all of those good qualities as well, but underpinning that was just like this rage,
Mm.
just this
Wow.
rage.
You said,
And hmm,
mm, I was saying, you said that you explained that so well. And even to our listeners, not to cut you off, that's
okay,
listening about that and thinking about even where they are currently, what you spoke about is so true. That shifting of, I cannot keep doing this way. This is not working. Let's talk about that, the energy.
yeah,
What is the, and how do you define goddess energy?
yeah. So the way that I started really, the way that I started really understanding and getting more clarity on what that was, because I've talked about religious conditioning. I've talked about when I started to, learn about patriarchy. And when I started to learn about patriarchy, that was when I was introduced to matriarchy. That was when I started learning about matriarchy, because I knew, I was like, this isn't natural. This isn't natural. This is not the way that we are designed to operate. We're not designed to live in a world full of turmoil and war and death and rape and anguish and torment and all of the things that people are experiencing in seemingly greater and greater quantities, you know? And when I started to learn what matriarchy was, I was like, whoa, what's matriarchy? What's this? And when I started learning about matriarchy, I learned that, patriarchy as a system is only about 4 or 5 thousand years old.
Mm,
A lot of people think and believe that the system of male dominance, which is essentially what patriarchy is, it's an hierarchical system of male dominance. They believe that this is human nature. They believe that this is how it has always been throughout the entirety of human existence. And the reason why they believe that is because her story, like we learn his story, but we have not learned her story.
mm,
And her story has been erased and eradicated and misconstrued and hidden from society as a function of bringing patriarchy into existence. So about 4 or 5 thousand years ago, when the first patriarchs began overthrowing the matriarchal civilizations and societies, because the entire planet was matriarchal for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, the entire planet was matriarchal. It was the goddess, it was the woman as the embodiment of the goddess that was worshipped as God.
mm.
And
Wow.
it was when patriarchy started coming into existence that the goddess was usurped and then replaced with the idea of a male god or male gods, depending on which religious angle you're looking at. And so when I started learning about matriarchy and the goddess, and again biology, because this is what I believe. Everything that I'm talking about is supported by science. And this is why learning biology was so important for me, because I learned about the chromosomes, like the X chromosome and the Y chromosome. And, the X chromosome is the original, the Black woman is the original. And the Y chromosome has only been in existence for about, well, what I'll say is that the Y chromosome did not show up in humans until it was at least 100,000 years after. So what that shows is that at one point in human existence, the entire world was female. And that's still evidenced in the way that humans come into being today. Every single human, when they're in the womb, begins as female, right?
Mhm.
Every human in the womb begins as female. It isn't until about, I believe it's and please forgive me if I'm incorrect in my timeline, but from what I remember, it's about 8 or 9 weeks into the pregnancy is when, if the SRY gene, which is what's carried by the male gene, if that basically mutates into a Y chromosome, then what happens is that female becomes male. It's basically a mutation. So learning all of these things about biology and the nature and the original nature of humans and women being first, women being the original, I was just like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense. It all makes sense. And so what I started doing was it gave me confirmation that the instinct that I had had even as a child learning about the Bible and the other Abrahamic religions, which came about as a result of patriarchy. These are all patriarchal religions. It answered all of my questions about why things didn't make sense. How can he be the creator of everything when all life comes through the female? All life comes through the female. And that's not just in humans, that's in animals, that's in plants, that's in insects, that's in nature. There are some species, of course, that are asexual, but as I'm saying, humans at one point were all female and reproduced asexually through parthenogenesis.
So the goddess energy, is that where the goddess energy comes from? What exactly is it for folks that's trying to understand or tap into something else? What is that goddess energy?
So female, like feminine energy, the goddess energy, like when I talk about goddess energy, I'm talking about feminine energy. I'm talking about the divine feminine. And so the divine feminine is the creative principle. It is creation. It is God. It is the womb from which everything in existence comes from, where everything was birthed from. And you see the congruence in the physical manifestation of birth, where a woman has a womb and grows this life and sends this life through the portal of her vagina, her cervix and her vagina into the physicality. And so the divine feminine is God. The divine feminine is creation. And even the masculine, the divine masculine, which is, you know, a lot of people see the divine masculine as the counterpart to the divine feminine. The divine masculine came from the divine feminine. The divine feminine is the origin of everything. And so in the metaphysical sense, we are talking about there's congruence or correspondence, meaning that everything that exists in the physical is a manifestation of energy that first happens in the ethers, in the energetic realm, or what people might call the spiritual realm. So it's like thinking back to like the Bible, for instance, which, you know, I believe in the book of Genesis, it talks about like God said, and let there be light. And then there was light. It's like speaking things into existence. So first it is a thought or a desire from the creator, and then it becomes a physical manifestation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
So when I talk about the divine feminine energy, what I'm talking about is the creative essence that lives in all human beings, but that women, as the feminine embodiment of that, have the most pure, direct, and powerful connection to, because that is what we represent. We, as the physical body of the female, female meaning feminine, we have the most clear and powerful access and expression of that energy. We are the physical expression of that energy, just as the man is the physical expression of the masculine energy.
Mhm.
So both of these energies work symbiotically to create, but it is the feminine that is the ultimate or supreme creative principle.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask in that, because we did speak about signs, there are times where some females have more of um, testosterone, and it's testosterone, right? Sometimes male may have a little bit more estrogen. Can you speak about that? Do you believe in that? Because I know we spoke about science just a while ago with the chromosomes. So that is factual.
Right. So everybody now there are, of course, instances where where like a woman might have more testosterone due to illnesses or energetic imbalances, and the same with men. And there are genetic anomalies, just as there are in all other species, where, like a good example that a lot of people bring up is like intersex. So like there are people that are intersex where people think that, oh, well, you're both of these things, but even intersex conditions, you are still male or female. There is just a disorder of sexual development that causes you to have, like one example would be like, I believe it's called androgen sensitivity disorder, where, but androgen sensitivity disorder is something that only happens in males. But when we're just talking about pure energy, I'm not talking about genetic anomalies. All human beings have feminine and masculine energy within them, because feminine and masculine energy work symbiotically for creation.
Mm, got it.
But when
So
we talk about feminine and masculine energy, people think that you have to have like an equal amount of both, or that there's like this special ratio that everybody must have, but we're all unique individuals. We're all unique expressions of God. So there might be a woman out there that has a lot more masculine energy than another woman might have within herself. But that's not a problem. It's just the beauty of differentiation. We're all different. We're all unique. But even if you are a woman with an abundance of masculine energy, you are still a woman, and you are still the physical embodiment of the divine feminine. You just carry more masculine energy in your expression. And where we're getting kind of caught up, especially as it relates to like some of like the social movements, is you have people that have a lot of one type of energetic expression within them or feeling within them, and they think because I feel more feminine, therefore I am a woman, even though my entire physical being is male.
mm,
And that's where a lot of the confusion comes from.
got it. Got it. And this leads me to ask you this question. Can certain energy create roadblocks in our lives?
Yeah.
Can certain energy, and talk about that in relationships, whether career wise or personal family? Talk a little bit about that. And what can we do to adjust or shift our energy?
Yeah, so this is something that I do with my clients that I work with, because they come to me and they say, well, I have all of these dreams, I have all of these goals and these aspirations, but I don't know how to do that, or I feel blocked. I feel like I don't know who I am. I don't know how to, take action to move forward into manifesting my dreams. And a lot of that comes from things that happen to us in childhood. So when we're talking about trauma, when we're talking about these spiritual and energetic wounds, it comes from having an experience that doesn't get to be fully expressed and processed out of the body. So a good example would be when you're a child and you go like you go in front of your parents and you start singing a song, and you're just like singing at the top of your lungs, and you have no you have no concept of embarrassment, you have no concept of shame, you have no concept of fear. You're just fully expressed, and you're just singing and having a great time. And then someone tells you, you need to stop singing, you sound stupid. And all of a sudden, this child hears someone that they love and trust and admire telling them to stop doing the thing that they feel really good about, telling them that they look stupid or that they sound bad. And then they internalize that. They internalize that idea that's now been projected onto them, and they begin to believe it. Well, mom says I sound stupid, and mom is God. Dad is God. Everything that we absorb about the world typically comes from the majority of it comes from our parents. You know, our parents modeled to us how to show up in the world. So when you're a young child and you are rejected or you're made fun of or you are, you know, reprimanded for just being yourself, and you're told you're not allowed to be this way because this way isn't okay, then you believe that, you take that energy into your body, you take that belief into your body, and then you create a story around it. Well, I can't sing because I don't sound good, or I can't sing because I'll get punished, or I can't play loudly because mommy's going to be mad about that. Or what the core of it is that if I do this thing, I'm not going to receive love. That's the core of it. I'm not going to receive love if I do this thing. This is what, on an energetic, internal level, what the child is experiencing. And that's why they shut off those parts of themselves. But what it creates is a disconnect because now your energy is not flowing as it's intended. You're not expressing yourself as intended. You're creating all these little roadblocks in your system where now you're not using your voice in the way that you were designed to use your voice. So as you get older, then it starts manifesting in other ways. So when maybe a man, you're dating a man and he says something to you that you don't like, but you don't say anything about it because since you were a child, you've been taught that, well, if I say what I really feel, I'm going to be punished, or someone isn't going to love me, I'm going to be rejected. And then you carry this with you your whole life. And then what it happens is you begin to manifest more and more experiences that confirm this belief system that you have within you. And this is how women end up manifesting abusive relationships or toxic relationships, or they start doing things that are very harmful to themselves, whether it's poor diet choices or promiscuity or recklessness with money or any of the other things that they do. It's because when they were very, very young, they were instilled with this story or this narrative that if they are fully expressed, if they show up as themselves, if they say the thing that's on their heart, if they sing, if they dance, if they play, pick whichever one relates more to you, then I will not receive love, or I will be ridiculed and I will be rejected. And that is where a lot of these blockages come from. And then we become adults where we forget that we had these experiences as children. But the thing is that that energy still lives within your body. It is unhealed and it is unprocessed. And so the way that you heal that is through, there's so many ways that you can heal that, but the umbrella term that a lot of people use is shadow work. Because this aspect of yourself that is unhealed is what we kind of like refer to as the shadow, or sometimes we call it the ego. And so by doing shadow work through breath work or inner child healing or somatic exercises or journaling, these are the ways in which you give yourself a chance to fully experience, to re-experience the thing that you experienced in that moment and process it through your body so that you're no longer carrying that energy, that blockage within you. And this is the work that's really necessary for women to heal in a real way. Because again, like what I said before about, we often just treat the symptoms. So you have a lot, like the big thing right now is everybody and their mother has anxiety. Everybody and their mama has ADHD. Everybody and their mama has OCD. And we are talking about these disorders as if they're just a normal part of being a human, but they're not a normal part of being human. These disorders manifest from unhealed trauma and wounds. And so what people are doing is they're medicating themselves. They're taking pills and injections and things like that, and just accepting, well, I just have anxiety. I just have ADHD, when that's not addressing the root cause of why you are experiencing these disorders. And so when you start addressing the root cause of why you have anxiety through somatic work, through energy healing, a lot of the things that I do with my clients, that is how you heal anxiety. Like a good example would be, I had a client who was dealing with Like her anxiety would often manifest as really, really intense procrastination.
Mm.
Like intense procrastination where she could not get work done, or she would get down to the wire and have to like with a lot of stress and frantic nature do the things that she needed to do to get them done, and she couldn't understand why she had this like debilitating feeling of procrastination. And when I did some somatic work with her, like I have a modality that's called soul synthesis, where I help you tap into your body's inner wisdom, where you can literally see the exact event that caused you to have a train of thought or a feeling or a trigger wound. And what we learned in this somatic practice, which took 5 minutes, the origin of her procrastination came from a really traumatic experience that she had with her stepfather when she was like 10 years old.
Mm. Wow.
And we
Wow.
were able to clear that. We were able to heal that from her system to heal her procrastination.
Mm, mm, mm. And that leads me, the work that you're doing is so phenomenal. I
Thank
want
you.
to ask you as we close off, I have a two-part question. I want to know, because the energy work that you're doing, you have to protect your own energy, right? I want to ask you about that. How do you protect your energy, and how imperative, Andrea, how imperative it is for men and women to understand energy, goddess energy, or
Mhm.
this type of energy transfer?
So for me, protecting my energy for me is really related to sort of like the having a lot of eyes on me, like on social media and things like that. So I have my own rituals and practices to sort of like create like an energetic barrier around myself so that I can't be permeated by like the evil eye or people's jealousy or negativity and things like that. And this is also something that I teach my clients, but the work that I do one-on-one or in group settings with women is very interpersonal. It's very, I mean, my energy is penetrating their energy. And one of the ways that I protect myself from overextending my energy is to make sure that I'm invited to serve this person. And so I teach human design as a way of helping people understand like their own energetic auras. And so like I'm a projector in human design. And so I'm designed to wait for the invitation. So I don't give my advice, I don't give my guidance unless I'm asked. And so that's one of the ways in which I protect my energy, because I used to constantly just like tell people things without them inviting me. And then they would get really upset. They would reject me because they weren't ready. Because
Mm,
the work that I do is so penetrative and it is so deep that the person has to be ready to receive it. And so for me, I protect myself by making sure that I don't share anything specifically with individuals unless they invite me in to do that. To answer your other question around, you know, how important it is. First of all, understanding energy is essential because everything in existence is energy. We are energetic beings. Everything that has life in it, that has life force in it, is an energetic expression. And all of the energies are coexisting and coalescing together in this big mosaic soup. And if you want to understand how to shift your life, you have to understand how energy works. So, like a good example would be, like you know how the old saying, "An eye for an eye makes everyone blind." So, what that's saying is that the energy that you put out is the energy that you get back. And so a lot of people don't understand that if you want to receive love, you're not going to receive love by putting out anger and putting out hatred and putting out blame and putting out controlling force. You will only receive love by giving and showing love. And so if you're putting out anger, or if you're feeling a lot of anger inside that is unexpressed, what you're doing is you are attracting to you the very thing that lives within you. Does that make sense? And so this is why it's so important for people to heal and to process that energy out of their systems, because they're having all of these experiences where they're they're going through hell, or maybe they're not making enough money, or their dreams aren't coming true, or they keep attracting bad men, or they keep attracting, broken women, or whatever it is, and they don't understand, well, why is this happening? Like, what's going on? And it's not to say that they're not a good person, but a lot of times people will feel like, well, am I a good person? Or I'm just a shitty person, or I just have bad luck. I'm cursed. But it's not that you're cursed. It's not that you have bad luck. It's that you have energy within you that maybe you're not aware of, that is attracting to you experiences that match the frequency of your energy. So if you're continuing to have painful, negative experiences that you don't have the tools to move through, then it's time to start looking at, well, what am I repressing? What am I suppressing within me? And doing the very difficult and painful work of moving through that, because that's what's going to give you the ability to start attracting really beautiful experiences and thus the life of your dreams. But that is essential to the process of creating a beautiful life for yourself, is healing those unprocessed, repressed emotions and experiences within you that date all the way back, not just into childhood. We're talking multi-generational. We're talking about things that were passed down from our mothers and grandmothers and fathers and grandfathers, like disease. People talk about, well, cancer runs in my family. It's not that cancer runs in your family. It's that trauma is continuing to be passed down and it's manifesting into cancer. And if you heal that trauma, that same trauma that your mother had and your grandmother had and your great grandmother had, if you heal that trauma within yourself, you're not going to get cancer, even if your mother and grandmother had it and died from it. They had it and they died from it because they had all of this unhealed wounding within them that wasn't processed, and it manifested into cancer. But if you heal that trauma within yourself and you heal your bloodline, then you also will prevent yourself from attracting these autoimmune issues and cancers and reproductive, the fibroids and endometriosis and PCOS and all of these things that a lot of melanated women deal with. That's unhealed trauma. That's not just unlucky. It's not because the medical system is racist. It's not because of all of these excuses that we have. It's because we have a lot of unhealed trauma that's manifesting into these diseases. And so understanding energy and how energy in your body creates blockages that then turn into disease, that turn into illness, that turn into these really painful experiences, that is how you're going to heal yourself, become healthier, become happier, and have a really beautiful life.
Oh my God. Andrea, you are speaking into my soul. I am so appreciative. No, seriously. I got to bring you back on. I really hope that the invitation to come back on, because what you're doing is amazing, and the work that you're doing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Oh my
you.
God.
And I hope that next time we get to dive even more into the divine. I mean, everything that I'm talking about relates to the divine feminine. I know that consciously it maybe doesn't sound that way or may not make sense that way, but it's all interconnected. Everything that I'm talking about, even though these seem like abstract ideas or they seem like they're unrelated, they're all directly related to each other. And that's the work that I do, is like drawing those connections, creating those synapses, and bringing awareness to the interconnected nature of all of these things and why we are living in a state of the world that seems so effed up. But it's because of all of the unhealed, unprocessed trauma with us, and the fact that we are living against nature. We are living in a system that tells us that the male is on top, the feminine is weak, when the feminine is the source of all creation. And as the divine feminine consciousness continues to rise and more people become aware of the distortion, then we will start to see our world shift on a global scale.
I agree. And this conversation is very polarizing as well, but it's so needed to be had. I wanted to ask, as we wrap up now, I know you do retreat. When is your next retreat? Because I will be there. And so yes, as we wrap up, when is your next retreat? Or what's next for Andrea?
So I don't know when my next retreat is going to be. I am in the process of just sort of like recalibrating and getting clear on what's next, what I want to do next, where do I want to go. because I just finished my last retreat in March and it was a lot. It was a lot. It was my first time and it was a lot. I learned a lot of really beautiful lessons. I learned a lot of hard lessons about that experience. And so I'm taking those lessons and growing from that so that I can be better and better and better and better in the future. But what I will say is that anyone that wants to work with me, I have a number of ways that women can work with me. Like obviously, I produce free content on my Instagram page and I just posted my first video on YouTube last week, so I'm now going to be putting more long form content on YouTube. But I do offer a number of ways to work with me one-on-one. I have spiritual alignment sessions where you can drop in with me for a single session, and it's just to really help you recalibrate, get clarity around what your wounds are, what your blockages are, where you are hindering yourself in your process of growth, and giving you an opportunity to reconnect with your own spiritual and internal feminine wisdom so that you can create a beautiful life for yourself. I also offer long-term mentorship for women, which is like it's like my most intensive way of working with me. Like this is for women who desire radical transformation. Like you are ready to become the woman of your dreams and you work with me one-on-one for an extended amount of time where we completely rewrite your entire narrative and heal traumas, heal blockages. I teach you tools on how to live and show up for your life in the most authentic way, to show up in a way that is connected and grounded and present, and how to deal with conflict, how to deal with people's projections on you, and how to really understand yourself as the divine feminine, as a conscious creatrix, as a goddess who is responsible for the creation of her life and creating a life that is absolutely in tune with your potential and the power that lives within you. That's what my one-on-one mentorship is all about. So you can work with me in individual sessions. You can also do mentorship with me. You can come to me for an energy healing where I work on any number of like physical ailments, or whether it's emotional or physical ailments. So anything from depression and grief to reproductive disorders. I also offer womb healing sessions where I call it womb restoration, which I designed specifically for women who have had, sexual trauma or healing from promiscuity, or are dealing with reproductive issues such as endometriosis or fibroids or painful periods, to help you reconnect to your womb. I have so many ways that you can work with me one-on-one outside of retreats.
Thank you. Oh my God. We are going to put up all of your socials.
Thank
Andrea Bardot, actress, because that's what you are. That's how we know. Energy healer and intuitive guide. Thank you for chopping it up with us. Thank you for sharing space.
Thank you so
Thank
much for having me. It was such a good time. And I'm so grateful for you for giving me this platform and for having all of these incredible conversations. Your podcast is magnificent.
thank you because of people like you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. You guys, as you already know, this is the end, but don't worry, Andrea will be back and we will share all of her information at the end of this episode. Guys, what you have to do, like, subscribe, and continue to share. This is a powerful episode. Please share it with your community. Bye, you guys.